Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Before I begin, I'd like to acknowledge that we're on the traditional lands of Treaty 6. I'd also like to acknowledge the Métis people of Alberta who share a deep connection with this land. It's great to be here today to release our third quarter economic outlook and fiscal update. The economic and fiscal trends evident in my last quarterly update have accelerated. Jobs are up. The deficit is down. And every day, Alberta's recovery is gaining strength and momentum. Three numbers tell this story. Over the last year, Alberta has created 90,000 full-time jobs, the vast majority in the private sector. The deficit is down $1.4 billion from budget. And our economy grew by 4.5%, the fastest in the country. Are we out of the woods yet? No. We will work hard to ensure that every Albertan feels the recovery, just as those 90,000 Albertans who are back to full-time work are feeling it. We will do this by continuing our fight for market access so that Alberta and Canada can get full value for our resources. Alberta is on the right track, and we are creating an economy to last for working people, which I'll lay out in Budget 2018. Let me break down the numbers a bit. I'm pleased to report that Alberta's economy continues to show entrenched and broad-based recovery, and growth is exceeding previous expectations. As I said, the recovery hasn't yet reached all Albertans. 2017 will be remembered as the year Alberta turned a corner in recovering from the worst economic downturn that we've experienced in a generation. This third quarter report shows a solid rebound in business activity, an improvement in oil prices, and a labor market that continues to improve. And most importantly, we project that our economy is expected to post solid growth again in 2018 after exceeding expectations in 2017. This good news means our government's decision to support Albertans, protect frontline services, invest in infrastructure, and keep as many people on the job as possible during the recession was the right call. And we know it's working because the numbers tell us it's working. 90,000 full-time jobs over the last year, and this number is largely driven by good mortgage-paying jobs in the private sector. Every morning, more Albertans than ever before are getting up to go to work, helping to build their communities and drive our economic recovery. And are they ever delivering results? For the third time this year, we are upgrading our economic growth projections for 2017. As Alberta's economic outlook has improved, what started as a forecast of 2.6% GDP growth in the budget has grown strongly to 4.5% in the third quarter. We led the country in growth. Alberta is where it belongs, on the top. Things are looking up, and they really are. Along with the job numbers I mentioned, exports are up, manufacturing is up, and consumer spending and confidence is way up. Interprovincial migration is up, with workers around the country recognizing that the best jobs and opportunities in Canada can be found right here in Alberta. And these positive numbers don't just mean that things are better today. It means that they'll be better in the future as well. We're revising our forecast for GDP growth in 2018 up to 2.8%, and employment is expected to rise by 2% in 2018. But not everything in the third quarter fiscal update is growing. One thing that is getting smaller is the deficit. The deficit forecast for 2017-18 is now $1.4 billion lower than we expected in Budget 2017. This positive movement is based on several factors, including a series of cost constraint measures and higher than expected revenue. This is proof positive that we can reduce the deficit without the extreme and risky cuts that some have proposed and are still demanding. As mentioned at Q2, we've taken a series of measures to constrain costs while continue to support and protect the frontline services Albertans rely on. These measures include cutting salaries and eliminating bonuses and perks from the highest paid executives on our agencies, boards, and commissions. Continuing the salary freeze of non-union public sector staff and management. Consolidating and transforming government corporate services such as communications and IT. And working to find reductions in healthcare costs through initiatives such as using more generic drugs and reviewing operational best practices. And negotiating practical agreements with our public sector union partners, such as the Alberta Teachers Association and the United Nurses of Alberta, to control spending while making sure that the teachers and nurses your families depend on can continue to serve you well. As you can see, we're making a real effort to control costs. As the effects of the oil price collapse have started to fade, we continue to find savings and diversify the economy. Alberta is on its strongest economic footing since 2014. However, these changing circumstances bring a new challenge back to the forefront, namely market access. Alberta is producing as much oil as it can physically get to our customers through current pipeline and rail networks, but there's a bottleneck. This means that our oil is being sold for much less than what it's really worth on the global market. Unfortunately, because Alberta is landlocked, our options from here are limited. That's why Premier Notley and my colleagues in government are fighting so hard and leaving no stone unturned in our efforts to get new pipelines in place that will bring our products to Tidewater. We're pleased to see that last week that the BC government stepped back on some of the aspects of their unconstitutional efforts to block progress on the federally approved Trans Mountain Pipeline. This pipeline and the other pipeline in the works will increase our market access and allow Alberta producers to earn up to $7 more per barrel and boost royalty revenue to the province by up to an estimated $9 billion between 2017 and 2022. And this is more than just an issue for our province, it's an issue for all of Canada. Alberta's oil and gas sector employs people from across the country. We buy $75 billion in goods and services from other provinces annually, and we account for 17% of federal tax revenues, despite accounting for just 11% of the Canadian population. Without a doubt, we are the engine that drives this nation's economy. When Alberta prospers, all of Canada prospers. It's time for us to get on the same page as a country and to get these pipelines built so our industry can continue to benefit so many Canadians. So what does this mix of positive growth and persistent challenges mean for Alberta moving forward? Well, it means that we're certainly headed in the right direction, but there's more work to be done to ensure all Albertans feel the recovery. It means the worst of the recession is behind us, but we're going to have to continue making careful, measured, and thoughtful choices to stay on the path towards balance in 2023, 2024. And most of all, it means that we're going to keep making life better for Albertans. I've had the great pleasure of connecting with many Albertans, business people, and financial experts to gather input on the upcoming budget. They've reinforced some of what we're already doing and given us good feedback and motivation to prioritize Alberta's budget in ways that will help contain spending growth while ensuring we continue to enjoy the economy that's built to last. I'm pleased to be able to deliver so much good news today because of the choices of this government and the hard work of Albertans. I can't wait to share more on our plan for a prosperous future when we release Budget 2018 next month on March 22nd. I don't know who won the pool. You did. Congratulations. James. And I'm sure I'll have to say this to you many more times in the coming days. Stay tuned for more details on the budget. Thank you. And I'll deal with questions now, or he'll deal with questions now.
Go ahead. There are questions on the floor.
Would it be fair to say you're happier today than you have been since you became Finance Minister?
Yeah, no, I think this is great news, especially for the 90,000 folks who now have full-time jobs and are going to work every day. I'm happy that the GDP in this province is led the nation in 2017 at 4.5%, and I'm happy the deficit is down, yes.
Minister, despite all the good news that has been presented today, it is an indication that business investment is lagging, and it doesn't show there's no indication that it's going to drastically improve. I'm wondering how big a concern is this for you going forward?
You know, if you're talking about the comments that Mr. Kenny has made,
It's actually in the
we
Q3
once
update.
again, well, I can tell you if you're not talking about his comments, that there is a significant improvement to our economy across all sectors. We know that manufacturing is up. We know exports are up. We know that people's confidence in purchasing is up. And we know that 90,000 people are going to be contributing to all of that positively. So all of that good investment by people and by what's happened as a result of an expanded economy will assist us. And the reality is that Alberta's oil sector expanded last year, and it was led by an increase of almost 60% in conventional investment. And I understand that Mr. Kenny was talking down Alberta with regard to investment generally. But things are looking up, and I just wish Mr. Kenny would stop talking this province down.
But investment dollars are going to places like the United States, and Canada has lagged when it comes to attracting new business and investment. Is there any way your government's going to address that?
Of course. One of the huge areas of effort are around diversification. In addition to the broad-based recovery that's happening, we know that diversification is taking hold. It takes time, but it's taking hold in places like Lethbridge, Alberta, where Cavendish is the largest single private sector investor in that city. That's good news. We know PDP 1, Petrochemical Diversification 1, has attracted great interest. And we know today, I think Suncor filed an application for massive new oil sands investment, a project that could create thousands of new jobs for Albertans.
Minister, you were saying that you're going to continue to try and constrain spending, but it still feels like a bit like, I mean, you get $2 billion more than you thought, and then you spend half of it. It still feels like this is a government that has trouble saying no when it comes to extra spending. That's a lot of money.
Well, you know, just on the constraining spending that we have been focused on, we've achieved our $400 million in in-year savings. We are working across to ensure that we achieve, you know, something as simple as discretionary spending across government and the ABCs. Everyone stepped up to make that happen, so we achieved our targets there. We're doing what's necessary, I think, on the constraining spending side. And with respect to, for instance, on the municipal grant side, we brought forward some grants because we knew we were going to have to pay for them anyway in the next year, the year after that, or the year after that. The drop in the deficit and the increase in the revenues gave us the opportunity to address some capital needs that municipalities have. This is something that governments do in terms of bringing forward spending, reprofiling that, so it can have the biggest impact in this province, and that's what it's going to do.
What message does that send, though? Because 2023, you want to balance this budget. Meanwhile, you get $2 billion this year and you spend half of it.
No, we will balance. We are on track to balance in 2023, 2024. We have shown great restraint in terms of our expenditures. The opportunity to address the issues municipalities have presented itself, and we took it. Frankly, it's no different than the federal government has done in the past and this previous provincial government has done. It is something that gives our municipalities greater flexibility and allows our economy to continue to fire on all cylinders.
You said we're not out of the woods yet.
No.
Because it's all relative. You mentioned so a smaller deficit, but still $9 billion. You mentioned 90,000 jobs. according to the briefing this morning, you lost like 43,000, so you're up like 46,000 really, because you lost jobs. It's not a net increase, 90,000, those jobs.
That's what 90,000 new full-time jobs in the past year.
Then there's been jobs lost during that time.
The lean has been towards full-time, which is far better than part-time.
When will the province be out of the woods?
In terms of our economy, that's in 2019. We are forecasting that we will be at pre-recession levels by 2019.
Okay, let's go to the phones. Operator, can you put through the first question, please?
Yes, your first question is from Rafi Boujikan, CBC. Your line is open, Rafi.
Hello, Minister. Thanks again for taking my question. It'll sound familiar. I was asking you yesterday about what you thought of the measures in the federal budget for fighting the opioids crisis. You weren't completely familiar with what they'd announced yet. They were saying $231.4 million over 5 years, including a one-time emergency fund of $150 million for provinces to launch some new programs. I was wondering if you were able to find out more about it in the interim, and what do you think of this a day later?
Well, generally, I think any additional funds that come, Rafi, to this province are good. I haven't dug into that anymore. It's probably a question more pertinent to the health ministers. But you know, the significant opioid crisis in this province, and it was in the paper again today in terms of another community in Alberta, is something we need to double down on in terms of addressing, both with addictions treatment and long-term help and preventative help for people who are experiencing it.
Any follow-up?
Yesterday you seemed to indicate that it's good to have more money, but this is not nearly enough.
You know, generally, I was talking about the entire federal budget and their response to Alberta, particularly around pipelines. There wasn't enough of any of that in there for me. I know there was a reference, but frankly, you know, in my short presentation here earlier, comments earlier, I talked about how important those pipelines, all pipelines are for the country and our economy as Canadians. In addition, I'm pleased to see some investments in on-reserve child intervention. I know that our government stands really ready to and willing to help the federal government close the gap in the disparity of services for on-reserve First Nations children.
Thank you. Operator, can you put through the next caller, please?
Yes, your next question is from Rick Bell, Calgary Sun. Rick, your line is open.
Good afternoon, Minister. You talked in the update and in this press conference about the importance of pipelines to the province's finances and the economy. Maybe you can answer, with that being the case, why did the government take pressure off BC last week when it's clear that the BC government is continuing, including this very afternoon, to obstruct the building of the Trans Mountain pipeline expansion?
Rick,
why did you take the pressure off by dropping the wine boycott and declaring a quote-unquote small victory?
Rick, I'm not aware of what BC has done this afternoon, but I can tell you that our Premier is acting in the best interest of this province. She's standing up for the energy industry in this province, and she is resolute in protecting our interests in this province and making sure that BC adheres to the letter of the law.
Thank you.
Thank you. Operator, the next caller, please.
Yes, your next question is from John Hempy, 770 CHQR. John, your line is open.
Hi, Minister. You know, I know that 90,000 jobs is being labeled as good news, but we do know that there are some people out there who are taking jobs that are lesser than their expectations or their career goals. They might be living a lesser quality of life as a result. For those at home watching you proclaim today is a good news day, what do you have to say to somebody who's working a job they've had to take, not one that they've wanted to take, just to make ends meet when they see 90,000 jobs being labeled a good thing?
Sure. In addition to that, I said that we're not done. We know that until we've got Albertans back in the difficult straits that some of them continue to be in. We are going to continue to work to diversify the economy so that more and more job opportunities are available across the economy in areas where they won't be returning in the numbers they were before. We know that there's work the Alberta government can do to partner with important stakeholders like post-secondary institutions and colleges and others to ensure that there's retraining take place. We'll continue to focus on building this economy so that jobs come back across the economy in a broad-based way. In the meantime, we're gonna do that and have people's back. I'm not satisfied. I'm happy that we're at the place we're at for those 90,000 full-time jobs that have returned. I'm happy that the GDP shows the strength it does in terms of leading Canada, but there's more work to do, and we're going to keep at it.
Follow-up?
I guess though, Minister, I mean, when we say 90,000 full-time jobs, if they're at, say, a 30% or 40% of what somebody was making prior, isn't it a little disingenuous to kind of wave it as good news when, I mean, let's face it, Alberta's used to a higher standard of living than the rest of the country in many places, Calgary especially.
I don't think I'm being anything like that. I think what I'm telling you is the reality. I know that average weekly earnings are up in this province. They've been, they will continue to go up with the strength of our economy going forward. I'm not satisfied either, and this has been a major recession and correction to our economy. We are coming back, and by 2019 we'll be recovered, but there's more work to do between now and then.
Thank you. We have one more caller on the line, then we'll come back to the room. Next caller, please.
Chris Farco, Calgary Herald, your line is open.
Hi, Minister. When you talk about the market access component, I see in the report that it said that the wider oil price differentials have cost your government about $500 million in bitumen royalties in this fiscal year or the upcoming fiscal year alone. And I'm just wondering, how big of a challenge is it going to be for you and for the budget and for Alberta's financial situation if you see these pipelines continue to be delayed or sidetracked?
Well, I don't think they'll continue to be delayed, Chris. I think what we're going to see is Trans Mountain get built, Line 3 get built, and Keystone XL get built. That's what we need in this province, we need in this country, frankly, to ensure that this country achieves all it can possibly achieve. This discount is problematic, and I believe that there'll be constructive, cooler heads that make this happen so that we all do better as a country.
Do you think that Canadians, or even among your colleagues in the finance ministers of the province, understand what's at stake for this province financially?
I do. Yeah, no, I think more and more Canadians are becoming aware of what's at stake. I think that this province is leading the way in telling Canadians. The companies are also leading the way in doing great work and outreaching to all of Canada. Certainly the Prime Minister gets it. The federal government understood and approved Trans Mountain Pipeline. So yes, this is crucial for Canada and needs to happen.
Thank you. We'll come back to the room for a couple more.
Minister, we learned last week from the Auditor General that the Education Department has been spending $300 million a year on an initiative to reduce teacher-student ratios, but not doing it. In fact, they were just dumping the money into other line items. What do you think about that? And is there a broader concern here? Are you confident that the departments, particularly the bigger ones, are using the money in the allocated fashion, or are they fudging the numbers a bit?
I also am aware of what our education minister said, and he said he would dig into this and make sure that the monies were having the intended effect that they were intended for, they were put there for. I can tell you that on another example, the health ministry is reducing down the operational growth, year-over-year growth of that ministry, and doing great work in that regard. So they're getting better value for the dollar every month they go forward. Yes, I am confident that the work of this government is on track, and we're constraining costs to the degree we need to get back to balance.
We'll take one more if there's one.
On cannabis, maybe how much of the tax revenue are you willing to share with municipalities?
I
Calgary is asking for the biggest product.
Who is?
Calgary,
Calgary's asking for,
for my area.
you know, I can tell you, first off, what I'm really, what's foremost in my mind around cannabis, legalization of cannabis, is the protection of children, the safety of our roadways, and the moving out of the illicit market in that market. That's important, and that will be my focus. We will sort other things out with municipalities as we go forward.
Minister, can I ask on that though? It's a bit early days, but do you expect there to be any, once you impose the provincial tax on the cannabis, do you expect there to be any surplus at the end of the year, or is it all pretty much going to go to programs and enforcement?
You know, in budget 2018, you'll see what we understand to be our projected revenues, I guess, going out several years. And I think it's fair to say for the initial startup and for the medium term, there will be no money. Thanks very much.
Thank you.